What's up, Dolphin? My name is Jim Greasehaber. Call me Grease, and I have an interesting way I think the Dolphins should move on offensively without Tyreek Hill.
I'm Jeff Scanina, and I'm looking for number 2 this week in the win column.
I'm Kyle Krabs, host of Locked on Dolphins, and it's about the little victories on defense. We'll get into it here today as we wrap up week 4 against the Jets and move on to the Carolina Panthers.
Fins up! It's the Dolphins Squad. Everything Miami Dolphins, every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from South Beach. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Sunshine, speed, and squad goals. The Dolphins Squad Show starts now.
Yes, it does. Jim Greasehaber, call me Grease. Jeff Scanina, call him Z. And that is Kyle Krabs, call him the best in the business. Locked on Dolphins podcast day in and day out. He needs that C4 energy drink.
That's right.
There with everything he's got going on. And, you know, I'll tell you this, we got a big show today. But first things first, Grease, let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app with FanDuel. We're going to give you our final thoughts on that win over the Jets. Regardless of the circumstances, a win over the Jets means a lot more than almost any other win. Momentum, question mark. What that means is, how much do they have? How much does it mean? What's going on inside that locker room? Z's going to give us his thoughts on that. Moving on from Tyreek Hill in terms of both strategy offensively and maybe permanently as a franchise. And then, of course, the Carolina Panthers preview, a huge game on the road against a 1-3 team that, to me, Kyle, I'll start with you, could really dictate how the rest of this season goes. A strong, tough road win here could put this team on a right path. A bad loss, and it could be deuces right there.
Yeah, well, I think if you lose to Carolina, all the wind obviously goes out of the sails for you. You have some corrections to make. I think you look at offensively, some of the schematic changes. I think that's where there's progress there. Defensively, I thought Anthony Weaver got in some interesting stuff in his Thursday press conference earlier today, even going down into the nitty-gritty of like Zach Sealer. And he talked about how smart Zach is, but when he was out there with who you felt like were your two most talented other options in Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips as two rookies, Zach's losing the ability to kind of digest before the snap what's happening because he's helping with the communications of the other guys. So that was something that stood out to me defensively was, hey, this game against the Jets, Zach has a little bit more in the way of splash plays and a couple of tackles for loss to set up a fourth down. And that's in part because we stopped platooning him with both the rookies at the same time to allow him to use some of that pre-snap time to really focus on what's happening on the offensive side of the ball before the snap. So teased it at the beginning as far as like little marginal victories. I think offensive, it's scheme adjustments that they made, and that'll get expanded further, and we'll talk about that. And then defensively was you saw some of the guys that you had hopes for making some plays against the Jets, even if it wasn't consistent just yet in the fourth week of the season.
And Z, what's it like when you're the vet? What's Zach Sealer going through with all those little babies in there?
It can be a headache at times, yes. But again, it's a work in progress. And eventually those guys will pick it up faster. Again, I was a big pre-snap guy. I know what Zach's going through. You love to know exactly what the set is, the formation, the personnel, where guys are lined up, who's who. You like all that and digest that. When you have a guy next to you, hey, what am I doing? Where am I lining up? If the linebacker calls a thing and we get to shift, the guy doesn't shift. Now you're yelling at him and you get caught pre-snap. You get in the helmet in your throat. It's not fun, and he gets frustrating. Him being a team captain, he's going to, pull those guys aside, especially Wednesdays and Thursday practices and Friday, and make sure those guys know exactly what they're supposed to do on each snap and each call, so they can fire off and Zach doesn't have to worry about it.
It's interesting how much it changes in a couple of years for Zach, and look what he was able to do last year, and how much your roles change in the NFL. And Kyle, when I look at this team right now, in the trenches, the defense got a lot of points early in the season. A lot of it was that Indy game, but I feel like along the line of scrimmage, they have really improved week to week from the Patriots, obviously the Bills, and the win against the Jets. I think they've gotten better every week up front, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to a guy like Zach Sealer on the defensive line. mentoring, educating those young kids. And, I call them babies. They are in terms of experience, but they are long on talent. If they can harness that talent and really help this team find ways to bring it out quicker, get them up to speed, I think that's been a big part of it these last couple of weeks as they've gotten better up front.
Yeah, and to your point, it's not a lack of physical talent, and I think that's part of what at times makes it frustrating watching it from afar, right? As Kenneth Grant has the physical ability at 330 pounds to be a disruptor, but also to be a player who anchors along the line of scrimmage. Jordan Phillips, the pass rush ceiling is modest right now, but it's a guy with a really good background as far as anchoring and leveraging the point of attack. Zach Sealer is Zach Sealer. And then you get into the edge room, and Bradley Chubb looks like a guy who's knocking rust off. I think Jalen Phillips has been the most consistent guy for them up front on the edge. And Chop's playing 35% of the snaps right now. So to Z's point of it being a work in progress, it's a tough draw to have all of that new and guys coming back and guys being rusty and having rookies, and maybe coaching wise, your rotation's not optimized for the guys on the field. And you draw that against, at least in weeks 1, 3, and 4, in my opinion, those are all really good run blocking offensive lines with Buffalo and the continuity that unit's had the last 2 seasons. They've had a starter miss one start the last 2 years for their starting 5. It's that gets crazy continuity, and they are really leaning into the ability to run the ball. And then the Colts, obviously, with Quentin Nelson and Bernard Raymond at left tackles, turned into a really good player. And Braden Smith at right tackle has been a consistent performer and a quality starter for a long time. And that Jets offensive line, maybe not picking up the blitzes and sorting things out in pass protection, but in the run game, like we talked about on Monday after the game, it's a really effective group. So I think it's a cocktail of a couple different things, certainly things that the Dolphins can do better. But to your point, Grease, I do see the incremental progress, even if you're looking at bottom line points scored, yards allowed, yards per play, yards per rush, and maybe you don't feel like the statistics are showing equal reflection of growth as compared to what when you really sit down and you kind of comb through each guy's performance individually.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Tyreek Hill a little bit later in the show, Z, but even with him, the shift was happening. The identity of this team has been shifting toward a running team, and Kyle talked about it. He said before the Jets game, wanted them to run the tar out of the ball, and they had more runs than passes in that game, and they've had a lot of success with Achane, and we've seen Ollie Gordon, and don't forget about Jalen Wright. So now with Tyreek Hill out, your identity is going to shift even more toward that. But one thing that always stood out to me, Z, and learning this game from some great mentors, and one of mine, God rest his soul, the Mad Dog, Jim Mandich. Dolphin fans love the Mad Dog, right? Well, one thing about the Mad Dog that he taught me about the game of football when I was just a young kid, running the football is a mindset. You could have Walter Payton back there, and you could have 5 Hall of Fame offensive linemen, and if you don't have that mindset to dominate the man in front of you, you're not going to run the football. So that being said, it's the formula for winning on the road too, running and stopping the run. But how much did this game help in terms of that mindset, in terms of saying, okay, we got Achane back there, we got a couple good guys behind him, the offensive line's getting more confident, our quarterback can't throw it over 20 yards, every drive's 13 plays, 30 yards, so we are a running team. How much does that shift in mindset help them, and how much does that confidence seep in after the game they had on Monday night? And really, Achane's been running the ball well all year.
The good thing about the run game, it helps both sides of the ball. And since we are struggling big time on defense right now, it shrinks the game. So we have less snaps out there. We run the ball, defense can get rested if there's a long drive, like it happened in the game the other night. We go down, we score. The Jets go down, we get a turnover, but it was a long drive. If we came out and went 3 and out on 3 passes and had all that time on the clock, who knows what the end of that game would have looked like for us defensively. But it is a mindset, and again, on both sides of the ball. If the offense is sticking that ball down their throat in the running game, everybody gets jacked up on the team. Now your play action pass opens up, and it gives Tua a lot more time back there to throw the ball and get it to his receivers, especially now with new young receivers, guys that haven't got a lot of playing time. It's going to help them out more. The guys are not going to be glued to them knowing it's a pass. And then on defensively, as a defensive player, you just die to stop the run. If you don't stop the run, it's a long day. And that's the mindset every day as a player going in there in the defensive room, we have to stop the run. We have to get it down and second and long, third and long, so we can turn these three big edge rushers that we have loose and let them go.
Yeah, and Kyle, average yards per completion 6.4, average yards per rush 4.7 for the Dolphins, and that margin is too small, obviously. But Achane's averaging 4.9 a carry. Man, he's having very quietly, almost like an MVP, certainly a Dolphins MVP caliber year.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I was just sitting down today thinking about content for next week at kind of like the third of the season mark through 5 games. And I was asking myself, if I was going to do awards, who would I recognize? And I think Devon Achane is the team's MVP through at least the first 4 games, because when they've been playing you soft and you want to run the ball, he's had explosive runs. When they play both your star receivers to this point tight and you're able to isolate him out of the backfield on some choice routes like they did against New England, he's making the plays. When you are in the red zone and you need a couple muddy yards to finish a run and score, he's done it multiple times. Like, all of that stands out. And I think you haven't seen a lot of him in pass protection. It's never going to be a strength of his, but he had a blitz pickup early against the Jets. That was an outstanding job getting up into the A-gap, not being passive, and he took a hit to Jamien Sherwood that allowed Tua Tagovailoa to throw a hook route to Tyreek Hill for a third down conversion on 3rd and 8. Like, that's the kind of growth for a player going into year 3 that, like, I really applaud, because the reps that he had last year in that regard were ugly. They didn't look good, and I think that's a really great sign for Miami, that he's a player who's really coming into his own in all phases of the position, not just as a runner.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of receptions, a couple of pass receiving touchdowns as well, Z. So a versatile back like that, able to help you in the run game and the pass game, that really helps Tua a ton. But, I mean, just getting Darren Waller back, to me, that the 2 touchdowns, the 3 catches, he got the onside kick, but I talked about him being a security blanket, a whoopee for Tua, right? And a tight end is that, but a big, huge tight end like Waller, he's got that Gronk size, maybe not the meat on those bones, but when you can throw that ball up to a guy his size and the odds are he's going to come down with it, those DBs are short, just have a guy like that is huge. So between Achane out of the backfield and Waller, and you have Waddle with Tyreek Hill gone, on the other side, we're going to get into the changes we'll see on offense that we think without Tyreek there might actually help Tua in the offense a little bit, because they might not play so far back and worry so much about the home run ball now. I know Waddle's not going to love it. He's going to see more coverages. But when I think about Waller coming back, that just helps everybody so much within that offense. And for him to come out of the gate the way he did after all that time off, man, I'd be feeding him that ball nonstop if I'm Tua. I'd be buying him lunch. I'd be like picking up his dry cleaning. I'd be doing whatever he wanted me to do.
Oh, yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's going to be, Tua's, safety valve, going forward. He's got the receiver, he got the running back, he's going to sprinkle it around, but I still think that Waller's going to be playing a big part, the next few weeks for sure.
Yeah, and Kyle, I know that we've been waiting a long time for Waller, and I know if Dolphins have any reason, they've been pumped about getting him back in his performance against the Jets.
Well, yeah, it was we've seen a couple of guys come down to South Florida the last couple of years, and it just doesn't happen, right? Like the Odell Beckham experience and the Waller kind of steady progression, and the beats reporting on, he stretched today, but he didn't do anything, or maybe he did some indie stuff, but he wasn't in team. And then you get to the Wednesday before the game or the Friday before the game, and Mike's like, Darren had a setback. He's not going to play. And everybody just kind of throws their hands up. It's like, here we go again with another one of these later career, formerly very successful players coming down. So to get some ROI the first time he touches the field and have it be in, especially that first touchdown. I mean, that's a rep that Tua said it was a trust throw in his Wednesday press conference. And he said, I can't remember the last time I put a ball up above the rim like that. I remember because I was there. It was when they had the 21-point fourth quarter comeback against the Ravens. He had one to Mike Gesicki that was like that in the back end line of the end zone for a touchdown as well. But you have not had even Jonnu Smith, for as much of a target sponge as he was last year. And ironically, with this Tyreek injury, you may see Darren Waller become a target sponge in some ways. It was not the kind of catch radius style player. Like, you can watch Darren Waller go up and elevate that, catch that ball, and know that he was a college wide receiver at Georgia Tech that converted to play tight end. Like, it's very apparent. And I think that's where eager to see how they implement it, and eager to see how the familiarity with Frank Smith, with Darren, and their time together in Las Vegas allows him to do maybe more things than you would think more quickly.
That's Kyle Krabs. That's Jeff Scanina. Big Z in the middle, just like it was all the way through his playing career. I'm Jim Greasehaber. Call me Grease. It is Dolphin Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your Fins every day with Kyle, and twice a week with the Squad Show. We got a long time left in this one, about a quarter of the way through. We're going to talk a lot about the momentum for the offense in particular, what the defense can do against Carolina on the road. Tyreek Hill moving on from the Cheetah, also moving on from the Cheetah. Two different versions of that we'll get to, and we'll look at that Carolina game. So much more coming your way. But first, Kyle is going to tell you about one of our great sponsors here on the network, giving you fantastic deals to do business with them. And we will be back with more of the Squad Show in just a moment right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you can get $300 in bonus bets if you win with that first $5 bet. That's right. You can pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Right now, the Dolphins in Week 5 visiting Carolina, favored on the road by 1.5 points over in FanDuel. So if you think the Dolphins are going to win by more than 1 point, you can get in on that action over at FanDuel and try your luck for that $300 in bonus bets. I love the many different ways that FanDuel gives you to play with it. That's parlays, player props, or live lines during the games. Makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something extra on the line for yourself. And FanDuel lets you play how you want. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started.
With FanDuel on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Look at that. We got those guys. So it's kind of fun flipping spots with these guys, musical spots with all of us here on the show. It's Grease, it's Z, it's Kyle, and yeah, big win over the Jets last week. But we turned the corner, right? In the NFL, it's not for long. You can't be too happy for too long. You want to take the good things from that win, keep the confidence flowing, take them into practice. And Z, I know the weight of the world off that locker room, and the heat squarely on McDaniel and Tua, and Greer took a lot of it, but no one feeling comfortable when you're 0-3. I joke around about you can't even get a free sandwich anymore when you're losing, you're playing on the team. But how long do the players enjoy the win and then you get back to work? How long does that spring in your step and that mindset of feeling that victory and having a little bit more confidence and a little more just oomph every day when you walk in the building, how much does that help as you start to prep for that next game and you hit the practice field?
Well, the good feeling usually wears off, when you go for the meeting the next day, unless you played really good. If you played just an okay game or whatever, your position coach is going to get you. I do it when I was a coach, guys come in high and mighty. I go, all right, well, let's watch our mistakes now, So you come down a little bit, but you're still in a good mood because you won the game. It's hard to win in this league, especially week in and week out. It's very hard to win. But you ride that high, but you also know you got to improve. So when you go in on Wednesday, now let's get back to work. You forget about the win. Now we're on to the Carolina Panthers. We got to figure out how we're going to stop this running game and get after this passer. I think, defensively, we have a good chance this week to really do something special, and keep it improving.
Yeah, and one thing, Kyle, Tua with no turnovers in that game, but his uniform didn't get dirty either. They did a great job protecting him, and I think that's really important to build on. Tyreek Hill, no Tyreek Hill, Waller or no Waller, you're going to have injuries all the time, even especially to your key players, right? But keeping him clean, keeping him from getting hit, and especially from getting sacked, rushed, turnovers, that was huge too. I'd like to see them continue that.
Yeah, and it was it wasn't as if you didn't feel some pressure. I was really impressed with how Tua handled those reps in this game, where I thought he looked like he had a little bit of extra bounce. There were a few times where he's got color flashing in front of his face. In the first couple of weeks, like, it didn't feel like, even if he was making a guy miss, the ability to reset his feet and get set up to throw didn't feel like it was super sharp. Where I felt the drops were a little bit more timely, and I don't know if that's because of what the play action and the rhythm of getting through your play fakes with the ball fake and then getting to the top of the drop and hitching into some throws, or you had a couple where you got an L at left guard, you get an L at right guard, and I got to look over and give a little flash fake and juke out the left side. He got out the right side of the pocket a few times and stepped out of a sack from Michael Clemens on one opportunity, and Malik Washington didn't quite finish a chance to come back to the ball and finish the play for what would have been a third down conversion late in the game. So credit all around to the scheme to get a bunch of crossers working across the middle that were available and open. Credit to Tua for making some rushers miss. And, they had a pretty tough assignment with both Quinnen Williams at defensive tackle, and then Will McDonald at the edge is a former first-round pick, is really coming into his own. And you watch that game through watching the offensive line and how Larry Borum gets an inside counter from Will McDonald, and then he comes back and the next time and he sets it right. And then the next big pass rush opportunity, McDonald sells inside, but then hits an outside spin move and gets another pressure. It was a really nice chess match. And Larry Borum is a backup player. If you recognize him through the lens of he's not a preferred starter, I really respected the way that he battled through that game. And I think there's some things to work with who you had at right guard. And Cole Strange is a former first-round pick who's struggled to kind of find his footing. I thought he did some nice things as well.
Yeah, and Z, the Panthers are really in trouble defensively, especially at linebacker. They have young kids playing linebacker. The Patriots just decimated them and hung 40 on them. And so you have opportunities here as an offense, looking at that film all week long, finding things you can exploit. And, when you see a unit like that on a defense with a bunch of linebackers like that, or you're playing on a unit like that, and that they're exposed and you can do different things against them, confuse them, trip them up a little bit, how much does that play into it for an offense like this, when you can just do so many different things going into a game feeling confident, opens up the playbook a little bit too? I imagine they have to be licking their chops a little bit for this one.
I would think so too. Carolina is struggling on defense as we are, and they're trying to find their way. They got the big guy in the middle, though. He's playing some pretty good football, so we got to be accounted for him, especially in the run game. But again, I hope we don't go in there and just throw a whole bunch of stuff out there. I hope Mike keeps keeping it dialed in so these guys are playing fast because they know what they're doing. We talked about earlier about, the young guys on defense. When you give them too much, their head spins. And that's why they're asking, the vet's next to him, what am I supposed to do here? That's the one thing you don't want. You want to play fast. So, hopefully, Mike goes into this game with a game plan. Yeah, you have your splash plays here and there, but he sticks to a plan and he just pounds the hell out of them. And
I have to ask you, Kyle, about Mike McDaniel. What's the temperature like with all the mailbag, with all the stuff you're hearing from the fans? Because I said at the end of last show, my parting thought, my final thought was leave Mike McDaniel alone. And Dolphins, get Tua out of here. I saw the comments this week with Tyreek out, now get Tua out too. And Dolphins always want a new coach, you always want a new quarterback, but I would urge you to be cautious with what you wish for, Dolphin fans, because have you not seen the lineage and the line of coaches and quarterbacks who have come through since Marino and Shula, and you always want to just get rid of everybody. I said leave Mike McDaniel alone. I still think he's going to be okay. I kind of sense throughout the first few weeks here that you don't. So I just want to do a temperature check on that with you and see how you're feeling, how the fans have been feeling that you talked to about Mike McDaniel, because I think he's done a real good job so far this year with what he's had and what he's had to overcome.
Yeah, I think I want to see growth from Mike, and I think that was the concern from 22 and 23, and you had like some big evolutions in 23, and then 24 kind of felt like we got handcuffed with some personnel issues where you could tell they were really coaching around the offensive line issues, where they were banking on both those offensive guards that ended up playing more snaps than the starters in 23. They got a lot of playing time, and they brought Robert Jones and they brought Liam Eichenberg back. And those guys were disasters. And then Austin Jackson goes down midway through the season, and they don't have the ability to run the ball. And Tua's on IR for a 4-week stint in there. So kind of a perfect mix worth of stuff. But for me, it's the timeliness of the play call getting it. It's the late calls and all of the road game shift motion mechanics and trying to put too much window dressing on when you're on the road and communication's hard, some of the challenge and game day management stuff. That's for me, like, I'm very sympathetic to team went from one of the most experienced to one of the most youngest rosters in football. And you got a lot of new, and that is hard. And you can look back through the transition that the Rams had with Sean McVay after they, had the injury-riddled season and the year after they won the Super Bowl. They end up winning 10 games when they went full-on youth movement with a bunch of day 3 rookies and UDFAs all over the roster, but they started slow, right? You can look at San Francisco, and kind of they had a transitional period in the midst of what's been a very successful run with Kyle Shanahan, just to go off the Shanahan coaching tree. Green Bay with Matt LaFleur, the year they get rid of Aaron Rodgers, they start slow, they finish strong and finish 9-8 and end up winning a playoff game that year. So I recognize that, like, the first 4 games is not going to define this season, but I just want to see some growth in the areas that you felt like, hey, maybe we haven't been helping ourselves with how we've been running the team on game day and what our approach has been to offensive and defensive football. And I think this Tyreek Hill situation is going to force your hand here. And I think it's a great opportunity for Mike to kind of look at the personnel that he does have and look at what's the best way to go about winning football games. And maybe it's not throwing the ball 38 times, right? Maybe it's not airing it out and getting Tyreek 12 targets and trying to run the offense through Tyreek Hill. And I think that's where you may have been forced into an uncomfortable place to have growth. But if you make the most of that opportunity, I might come out the other side of it feeling better for Mike McDaniel than I would have otherwise.
That's a great point. And Zia, I'll pick up on that with you because, and by the way, the Niners are up 14-7 on the Rams on the road right now as we go live here on your Thursday. But when I look, Zia, at what's going on and what Kyle just said, 11-0 when Tyreek went over 100 yards receiving his time on the field since he's been here, and defenses game planning to stop him. And we saw a lot of games without 100 yards. We saw a lot of double coverage. We saw a lot of guys playing way back off the ball to take away the deep threat, and Waddle's blazing speed as well. So you'll still see some of that. But I know Waddle's happy to step up in that number 1 role. How much does it change the offense? It almost sounds like a stupid question, obviously, with Tyreek, but in which ways, right? Do you still see defenses trying so hard to take away the home run threat? Does it open up more deep balls for Waddle and other guys? Does it next man up mentality? Do you go more toward the running game? How do you see this offensive identity changing in McDaniel's system without Tyreek?
I think he's going to get back to the basics, Mike. He's going to be more with the run game, setting up the pass. Yeah, he's still going to take his shots down the field. And now you got Waller again. Like I said, could turn into the Kittle, like in that system where it came from, right? He fits that. He can stretch it. He's no slouch now. He's going to work back into his playing shape, and he's going to give you some good catches and good routes. So I don't see a big change. I just don't see that one guy having to get his, like you said, 12 targets. You know what I'm saying? Because you got to keep Tyreek happy. I get that. There's players like that. I'm not mad at them. That's who they are. But now I think more guys get more opportunities, and someone's going to come out of the woodworks and going to be surprise everybody.
What about if you're put your DC hat on, Z? What if you're game planning against this offense? How does that change now without Tyreek Hill?
I think you can see more heat, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Because now you have to double cover 2 guys out there, until someone else shows that they're a threat. Because you have Waddle and Tyreek out there, and you got to account for both of them. So now you might have that extra guy hanging around. You might see a little more heat.
Well, the more you blitz, that opens it up for big plays down the field. Can Tua take advantage of that? We'll pick that up on the other side with Kyle, with Z. Jim Greasehaber, call me Grease. This is your Dolphin Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Continue the conversation about the offense post Tyreek. Then we switch to the defense. I know Z loves that. And we will talk about the Panthers game coming up. We have the odds. We'll give you a preview. What they have to do to win a game that they have to win on the road early in the season. No margin for error after those early losses. This is your Dolphin Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Step aside for a quick moment. We're not going anywhere. Hope you're not either. And we will keep it rolling right here with your Dolphin Squad Show. Right after with this background, just moving into the new crib, Don't hate on the new crib. I promise I'll have a better background. It looks much better in the 3-shot, though, but nothing looks better than a nice, shiny new Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 25 from the IIHS. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. On the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Look at that. The guy Z's right back in the middle. Back in the middle again. I think that's the saddle, though. I'm blowing the song there, guys. But a little Aerosmith for you. But I want to pick right back up on that with Z and Kyle. And Kyle, come to you. Z says Tua might see more blitzes. I have to feel like if I'm Tua, I would love that. He gets rid of the ball quickly. He's a smart dude. I think that would play right into his hands. And so maybe he'll get a chance to hit a couple of big plays to a Waddle. And I know Malik Washington's looking forward to proving what he can do in a new role.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I reflect on listening to Mike McDaniel and Tua and Bobby Slowick, was brought in as former Texans offensive coordinators on this coaching staff. They all talked about one of the big focuses from them this year was they caught a lot of what Tua calls tricky twos, right? And it's we're going to show you high post safety. We're going to play cover one across the board, where it's man coverage across the board. And then at the snap, maybe the nickel player rolls out and he plays a deep half. And the player over top of number 3 runs the middle, and they run Tampa 2, and they play the corners really hard over the top, and they play safeties up over top. And that's how they can press and play physical at the line of scrimmage to disrupt the timing of the routes, but then be protected over the top. But it looks up until the snap like it's cover one, and all the different exotic rotations on how defenses have gotten there against this Dolphins team. And it was so much so that they talked about how we would watch and prep for teams last year for what they do defensively. And then they would play us and we wouldn't see any of it, because it's the book of defending the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle is different than what we typically do defensively because of Miami's unique personnel circumstances. And the question there is, are teams going to continue to get outside of their own trends and tendencies on what they like as their pillars of play to defend Miami without Tyreek Hill? And if the answer is no, it almost sets you up for better success to be prepared for what teams are going to run in certain situations, because they're no longer breaking their own tendencies on how they choose to defend you. So that's what Tua said this week. It's kind of, we have to get into the flow of each game now and kind of figure out, but it creates this level of unknown of, hey, we're kind of expecting we're going to get the same kind of coverage shells no matter what because of who we have out there personnel-wise. It creates this curveball that they have to be ready to sit on and be ready to pick up. And I think that's the most interesting thing for me when you think about what it's going to look like from opposing teams and how they're going to choose to defend Miami.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to see what Tua does, and I'll be the one to say it. I don't have a problem saying it. You touched on it, Z. Tyreek at times could be a bit of a distraction, and a lot of receivers are. Most great receivers are, and you in a way you really want them to be. But when you're struggling offensively, it's not 2023. When you're winning, when things are going well, you can deal with that kind of stuff. But when you're losing, it can really fracture a locker room. It can mess up a quarterback's head. I don't think Tua is that quarterback that would get messed up by that. I have to say that. But I don't want to say it's a relief to not have a guy like Tyreek Hill, because I'd be an idiot if I said that. But you know where I'm going with this, in a way that spinning it into a positive for other players around. When you're struggling to not have someone constantly in your ear going, throw me the ball, I know that's got to help on some level.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Tua's going to be more relaxed back there, because he can go through his reads maybe a little bit faster instead of waiting on somebody to get open, to get that target to him, to get it out of the way. So I think, again, it's going to open it up. We're going to see Washington or someone else step up and, get more cracks at it, and we'll be all right.
And I think Achan's really going to shine more without Tyreek there. I think they're going to find more ways to get him the ball. And I look at Waller being a big difference maker there for Tua. So I think offensively, they haven't been a juggernaut anyway. When was the last time, Kyle, you'll know this right off the top of your head, when was the last time anybody was scared of the Miami Dolphins offense? The last game of the 2023 season, right? Ever since that whole thing happened with Tyreek and the arrest in game 1, he had the big long touchdown against Jacksonville that game, and they won the game. I think it was Jacksonville. They won the game. But after that, it was a year, and then Tua had the injury. So you're paying him a ton of money, which, as it turns out, really none of it was guaranteed, and he's going to get none of it from what I mean. It's crazy to even think that way. And I'm looking at Drew Rosenhaus like, what, bro? What kind of contract was that? So anyway, not for me to decide. It's way above my head and my pay grade. But I guess my point being, in the future, you'll have a lot of money free. You'll have a lot of things that you can do with that money. But here in the meantime, you have a bunch of guys who are looking forward to stepping up and proving themselves. We mentioned Washington, mentioned Waddle as a potential number 1. That's a huge bump in pay for Waddle if he max out in this opportunity. But who else are we not mentioning that you could see stepping up and taking advantage of a newer opportunity without Tyreek there in that pecking order?
So I'll go with a guy who's been in-house in Taj Washington, who was a 7th-round draft choice from the team last year and spent the entire year on IR. Had a nice preseason, and the Dolphins, without Tyreek throughout the preseason, Taj got some opportunities, elevated up, and caught a few passes, I think, in the Bears game with Tua and the first team offense. So that's a player. He's not a big-bodied guy. I think you will see more heavier personnels in general. With Alec Ingold, you saw some 22 when Tyreek first went down, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're going like old school 49ers I formation, 2-man blocking surfaces outside the offensive tackle, same side. Let's go. Let's get real heavy. And that's how they scored that second touchdown to Darren Waller, was they went really heavy with personnel. But from a wide receiver perspective, Taj Washington's the one who has been a healthy scratch thus far that I think will dress now as a result for Tyreek, and I think can give you potentially another man beater and separator because of the twitch that he plays with.
What about Cedric Wilson? What do you think about? You think he can contribute at all?
I think he will get there. I think what's fun about the Cedric Wilson signing is when Mike McDaniel first got here, their first wide receiver transaction was signing Cedric Wilson to a free agent contract. And then 2 weeks later, Tyreek Hill becomes available. And whatever plan that they had for Cedric Wilson goes out the door because you could trade for Tyreek Hill. And he plays 2 years in Miami, and then they move on and they cut the last year off of his contract. And now he's back with Tyreek being out the window. And that's a big-bodied physical player. I think he's probably going to take some time. It sounds like he had a procedure recently that he's working his way back from, so he's not practicing this week. He won't dress this week, but it's another physical player in the same light of a Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and there's not a lot of transactions that you can make the last day of September for a guy who has 2 years in your offensive system and is familiar with the terminology, the starting quarterback, and the concepts that you're running. So I do think that sets him up to eventually work himself into a non-pass catching volume role in the offense.
Yeah, and he, of course, has that knee that he's dealing with, too. And Storm Duck, we'll get to that when we talk defense. He's walking around, the sidelines. He's out there at practice, but he's not out there in practice. He's working out on the sidelines, so injury updates coming your way as well. But, Z, what do you see? And we're going to talk about this when we hit the Panther game real hard. But in terms of the Panthers coming up, you have a chance. Their linebackers are a mess. Their defense has been all over the place. It's a home game for them. You have to imagine they're going to come out with a lot of intensity and a lot of fire to try to erase the stain of what the Patriots just put on them. So where do you see this Dolphins offense being able to take advantage of that defense best? Do you think it's those routes over the middle that could turn into a quick hitter other than the run game? Because we know we're going to see a lot of Achan and Ollie Gordon in the short yardage situations too a little bit more. But when I think about the offense this week, and without Tyreek for game number 1, with Waddle being the number 1 guy, I might come out on play 1 and just house it to Waddle and see what happens. I mean, just make a statement, right? We might not have Tyreek, but we still have some burners on this field and some playmakers on this field. I might be real aggressive early against Carolina to try to take advantage of that defense.
Oh, I think Mike will probably stretch the field against Carolina. You know, their pass rush is not up to par right now. Carolina's, I think they have 2 sacks for the year.
Yeah.
You know, and not that many
crazy.
pressures can be honest. So
4 games, 2 sacks. That's awful.
Yeah. So I think, you know, Mike will try to stretch the field because, you know, he's going to feel good about the O-line blocking him up and, you know, stretch it every once in a while, you know, and I think Waller's going to get behind those linebackers and make them cover, which I don't think they can, you know, a guy like Waller, you know, because he's going to be better this week than he was last week. Every week he's going to get better and better. So that's going to help too.
Yeah, no doubt. Kyle Waller just keeps getting more and more familiar. And, you know, sometimes he was getting healthy, but at the same time, you know, he knows Frank Smith and you kind of knew what you'd get out of him. What about the rest of that tight end room? Because asking those guys to be major contributors without Waller is one thing, but then when you get him and you get, because those second and third tight ends are really important in the NFL.
Yeah, I would like to give Julian Hill some flowers for the growth that he's shown, I think, in the first month of the season versus last year, where they went after a couple UDFA guys a couple years. It was Tanner Connor, then it was Julian Hill, and Julian made the roster and eventually kind of took over for Durham Smythe as the Y tight end. And, you know, I thought he's been very consistent in the first 4 weeks. He caught a 2-point conversion against the Colts. He had the 19-yard catch and run there to set up a field goal that make it a 2-touchdown game late for 19 yards against the Jets this past Monday, and the movement that he's getting in the run game, right? Like that's expansion on edges, getting attached to guys in space. Those were things that last year when he got the elevated role was just very intermittent as far as the success rate, and it was kind of hit or miss. And I think he's been much better this year. So you have Waller as a guy, if you want to put him at the flanker, if you want to put him in the slot, you want to put him off the ball as an H, you want to put him wherever. Like the fact that you can go 12 personnel and have a 6-man blocking surface with Julian Hill as a guy who I think could be a really impactful blocker. And then if you get all the coverage lift because teams still want to play the roof off and they want to double Jalen Waddle and you get a check down opportunity underneath or a chip release where we're going to come off of a defensive end and just get it out of the flat and finish physically and punish somebody for tackling you for an 8-yard gain. Like I think he's trending in the right direction in that regard. And I think that in and of itself is a huge development because this offseason, I didn't really have a lot of confidence in what direction Julian was going to go with his player development, but he's taken a nice step forward so far in year 3, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see this offense. We spent most of the show talking about the offense, and rightfully so, but the defense, we'll switch gears a little bit here, and we got a couple minutes left in this segment. We'll continue transitioning in this Carolina game, and I think the Dolphin defense, they're going to have their work cut out for them trying to stop Baker Mayfield and Christian McCaffrey. Oh, wait, they don't have those guys in Carolina. Can you believe they fumbled those 2 guys? Are you kidding me? Good Lord.
Sam Darnold, too. Let's not forget Sam Darnold as well.
Darnold, right? Sam Darnold's another one. I mean, it's some organizations just all you can do is smile.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, imagine they kept all those guys. You know, they'd be a lot better than they are today. You know, they didn't get anybody to replace them yet.
No, and I don't want to rip my guy Dan Morgan too bad. I don't want to do that, Kyle. But no, it's rough in Carolina right now, and they've made some poor decisions. This team is not good, and the Dolphins have to take advantage of this opportunity. You got the Chargers after that, but you have some winnable games coming up. To me, you set the tone here either way because you lose this one and you lose a tough one on the road, Kyle, and then you end up with a real tough San Diego team right after that. This whole thing could go off the rails real fast, but a good, tough road win here. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and you possibly could get a win over San Diego. You know, it's a fun league. The Giants just beat them, right? It's a fun league in terms of momentum, and then some winnable games after that. But to me, this game is going to determine where the season goes. We touched on it earlier, but it's really important that we dive into this again because this game, you know, you never want to take too much and put too much on a Week 5 matchup, but this is really the season right now for them the next 3-4 weeks.
Well, yeah, the difference between 2-3 and 1-4 feels monumental. Huge. Right? Especially with how Miami played in week 1, and then you had a near miss in week 2 in a game that you frankly gave away, and then you had a chance to do things right at the end of week 3 to win that game, but you had the turnover in the final 3 minutes of the game. So if you can find yourself on Monday morning at 2-3 and look back and say, hey, we probably gave away a couple of games that we shouldn't have. but we're within a game of 500. I think you can start to stack some blocks psychologically within the locker room. But man, if you have another close game and you make mistakes late and you're waking up on Monday and you're 1-4, and it's like, I can just imagine what that psychology would feel like. And I think for everybody involved with what is at stake as far as the evaluation of what the future of this franchise is going to look like, there is a lot riding on this game, and I do expect them to perform accordingly.
I remember years ago doing a show when he was on the Dolphins with T-Buck, Terrell Buckley, and that Patriots loss. T-Buck had a comment about division games like that. You lose a game at home early in the season to a division rival like that, you still have a chance to get them back on the road. So they can make that loss right with a win at New England. You don't get that opportunity with a team like Carolina. You can't get that back. So you have to win these games, because you say early in the season, you say, hey, maybe you have a winning record in the division, but if you split those division games against the good teams, I'm not saying the Patriots are a good team, but you have a chance to get it back. This is Dolphin Squad Show, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jim Greasehaber, call me Grease. That's Z, Jeff Scanina. He can't wait to hit Bourbon Street at the end of the show, sitting there in New Orleans right now. He's going to eat some gumbo and some crawfish and just be on Bourbon Street having some fun. And that's Kyle Krabs. He's got a busy week every week, especially during football season. And Kyle is going to tell you a little bit right now as we take a break here on the show. Come back and wrap it up with the Panthers preview. Kyle is going to tell you about Monarch Money right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And if you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in just minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Do not let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. You can use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Oh, look at that. He's in the middle again. I'm trying. It's like a game.
Never know.
I'm trying to figure this all out. Where we stand and where we sit here on the screen. But no matter where we are, we all agree this is a huge game for the Dolphins this week coming up at Carolina. Kyle, where's that spread at right now? I know
Miami minus 1.5.
Minus 1.5 on the road against a Panther team that just went to Foxborough and got smoked 42-13, man. That is, I mean, you see the potential with Drake May. We saw it against the Dolphins, making guys miss. He made Phillips miss on a big sack opportunity, 3rd and long in the second half that led to a touchdown drive. Then he outruns a couple defenders to get it in the end zone. Young kid making some mistakes, Drake May, but they just put it all over the Carolina Panthers. And I want to start there, Kyle. This Carolina Panthers team can't be that bad on defense, can they?
Well, you look at what the Dolphins did and what their strategy was. It said, well, we want to get younger, so we're going to totally remake the defensive tackle room. We're going to kind of move on from the veterans in the secondary, get some young guys. Dontre Trader's a guy who's getting playing time that they really like. We're going to ask one player in the secondary, and that's Minkah Fitzpatrick to tie it all together. Carolina threw the money at everybody. They spent big again. And last year they spent big on the offensive line in free agency, where they paid Robert Hunt, former Dolphin, $20 million per season on average on a 5-year contract. It's a $100 million contract for Robert Hunt. And then their other guard that they signed in free agency was Damian Lewis, who's a good player out of Seattle, but he got $53 million. So they signed 2 guards to $153 million in total value of contracts. And then the defensive side of the ball, they signed a bunch of guys to play up front. They really went aggressive in spending money, and it's a lot of new, just like the Dolphins are experiencing. That team was historically bad on defense last year. I believe they gave up more points in 2024 than any year in franchise history as far as points allowed, and they would have achieved that without the 17th game too. So I kind of feel like this is where this team is at, where I think they have a really stout defensive interior. But I look at their edge rushers, and I don't see a consistent winner. They traded away Brian Burns to the Giants. Grease, you've mentioned the linebacker room. This might be, for my money, one of the, if not the worst linebacker room in football, with Christian Roseboom and Trevin Wallace.
Yeah.
I really like Lathan Ransom, their safety, who's a rookie this year. And obviously J.C. Horn is super physically talented, but I think they have some talent deficiencies that I think Miami is very well positioned to match up against. And then, oh, by the way, on top of that, everybody's new playing together as well, just like we see the Dolphins struggling with.
Z, how is this the same team that beats Atlanta 30-0 and then goes to New England and gets beat 42-13? How does that even happen? How do you shut out the Falcons and then lose like that to the Patriots?
You start believing your own press clippings. Usually that happens to young players. You don't have those solid vets there to keep their blinders on and pound it out every day, every week. Again, you can't get too high on the highs and too low on the lows. You got to stay middle of the road when you're a young, struggling team. And that's the same with the Dolphins. We can't live on our highs from last week. We got to make sure we're grounded going in this game, knowing we're evenly matched with this team like we were last week, and whoever doesn't make the most mistakes or turnovers has a chance to win.
I know the Dolphins DB room has been decimated, maybe still no Storm Duck. And Kyle says, no way on Xavier Howard leaving Indianapolis. And I don't know how that all worked out. But when I look at Bryce Young, the Panthers quarterback, he's not throwing the ball to the other team, but he's not throwing the ball to his team either. Kyle, I mean, he's all over. He can't hit anybody right now. His accuracy is all over the place.
Yeah, it's a player who last year got benched for Andy Dalton, right? And you kind of felt like, hey, maybe that's it for Bryce in Carolina. And then he ends up coming back and played pretty well in the back half of last year. It feels like all that progress is gone. He does not look like a player who's playing with a bunch of confidence. He's a player who I think stylistically, you go back to what he was at Alabama. He liked to hold the ball. He liked to create outside of structure. He has good accuracy, but he doesn't have a great arm as far as the ability to drive throws. He can throw with timing and anticipation. I don't think he's at Tua's stratosphere as far as those traits within his game. But that's not really I don't think he has the traits to play that way. And then you made a coaching staff hire in Dave Canales to try to fix Bryce in the same way that Mike was hired with the intent of optimizing what Tua Tagovailoa was. And last year, with those big expenses that they made on the offensive line, the back half of the year last year, they could run the ball. Well, this year they're averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Robert Hunt's out. The starting center's out. The backup right guard is out. Ike Ekwonu has not played well at left tackle. So it's kind of this storm where the things that you're banking on and Dave Canales brought in, I know he really believes in the concept of minimizing your offensive line's time under tension. And the way that you do that is by running the ball, even if you're not necessarily running for a lot of yards. And that goes back to when he was in Tampa Bay as the offensive coordinator there. It's just that they don't have it working right now. And Bryce, I don't think is well positioned to carry anything. And, they trade away Adam Thielen. Xavier Legette has been one of the least efficient wide receivers when he's played, and he's not made strides as a former first-round pick. They're fueling the ball through Tetairoa McMillan, their first-round draft pick this year, and that's really all they got working in the passing game. So it's a really bad mix of things for a quarterback that I think needs a strong supporting cast around him, and they haven't seen it yet this year.
Z, I watch sometimes on TikTok these sites where these people feed their dogs like all these big plates of big raw meat and bones and fur, and it's like these big dogs just eating. And I kind of feel like that's the Dolphins defensive line waiting for this Panthers offense right now. How you feeling if you're suiting up this week on the interior of that Dolphins defensive line? I know you got to be feeling really good about this one.
It should be a really good matchup for us up front. Yes. I mean, even on the outside, even though they have one good tackle out there, but I think our outside guys are going to get going. Again, we have those young guys inside, and we talked about it earlier. They're not really the pass rush yet, but once they get tied in with the older guys on the outside, we have a chance. Again, I'm going back to the growing pains thing. So we just got to play together more. And again, if we can get a nice, stop the run and get after this quarterback, we have a chance to get better and have more production this week.
And let's not forget the Dolphins played pretty well against Josh Allen. I mean, as well as anybody has this year, right? And then they weren't that bad against Drake May. I mean, the Dolphin defense has been pretty good, but knowing that you have a QB like Young and you have an offensive line that's decimated like that, how does that change the game plan, Z? How much more aggressive do you think they'll be on defense this week?
Again, you're looking for your numbers now. That's how it look.
Okay.
That's how
it's money time.
Yeah, I was like Chubb. He was going good. He went the first 3 games with a sack, I believe, right?
Yeah.
I think he was shut out last week, so he's chomping at the bit. He wants to get at least 1 or 2, to stay on course. Have a good year. That's how you look at it.
So I want to bring up special teams for a second, guys, too, because they were historically bad last week. Punt return yards against for Carolina. I mean, the Patriots just ran it all over them on kick returns. So Malik Washington not only stepping up with no Tyreek Hill in the receiver core, he could be looking for a big day in the return game too, Kyle.
Yeah, and I think the special teams unit, if you take away the personal fouls or what, we had a running into the kicker and then a roughing the kicker. The roughing was in week 3 against the Bills. The running into was it the Patriots, I think, or the Colts? It was the Colts in week 1. They gave a fresh set of downs. They go down, they score points, right? Like you have 2 penalties where you get into the punter's area, and then you have the kickoff return against New England. Now, those are 3 big plays. They all end up yielding points for the opposing team. But I think there's been a lot of good on that side of things. And seeing how New England got after Carolina, I would certainly have eyes on this element of the game, especially because it feels like in 2025, more than in any year in recent memory that I have, you're seeing game-changing plays on special teams every week with these block field goals, with these kickoffs, with the strategy.
What's up with all the field goal blocks? What is that? I'm like sitting here. I've never seen so many in my life.
It's amazing, and I don't know if it's, hey, we're going to kind of push the envelope. I don't know if it's kind of just a renewed focus in it with the discussion about the kickoff and field position battle, and we want to really maximize these possessions. I don't know what it is, but I'm right there with you. Where every week seems like 3-4 block field goals, half and get returned for touchdowns. We saw two or three return for touchdowns 2 weeks ago.
My buddy Herm Edwards is losing his mind. I do shows with him sometimes on ESPN radio, and all Herm, there's no more fundamentals. They don't even play in the preseason. And Z, you were talking about that too. So as we wrap this up, we're getting to the end of another show. It's time to talk. Let's get down to it. Z, what do you think is going to happen in this game? And we've talked about every matchup there is on the field. We've talked about where the Dolphins can exploit the Panthers. What do you think is going to happen on Sunday at 1 p.m. in Charlotte?
I think offensively, Mike's, like I said, he's going to dial it back down. We see more of a running game early, I hope, and get the play action pass going and take our shots downfield to Waddle, and get Waller involved early, get him some more touches. And then defensively, I think a lot of our success the other night was when we've opened it up a little bit and start bringing the heat. And I hope he does it more this week, early, get these guys going. Get this offensive line a little bit more on their heels, and not just blocking our guys, both run and pass blitzes, just heat them up. Why not? And then that brings turnovers. We got to keep getting turnovers, especially on the road, with an evenly matched team. We got to get more turnovers. And like we just talked about, I think that our special teams will dominate this week against theirs. And that's probably going to make a winning play or 2 off of special teams this week.
Yeah, what do you think, Kyle? I just want to add in there, too, that we're looking at 77 degrees and sunny for the weather, so no issue there either.
Yeah, as long as the weather's clear, right? You don't want to have it start getting wet and then the field gets sloppy and it turns into more of a slop fest where the variance goes through the roof. But I think that the Dolphins should feel good about their ability to get the ball on the edges in the run game against what Carolina has to work with. I don't know how much I would really test them with gap schemes and coming downhill between the tackles, but I just think you're playing into their strengths in that regard. I expect Mike to build off the progress with the play action passing and really put those linebackers in a blender in the passing game and be able to successfully get the ball in the middle of the field. So I think those are the 2 things working on offense is wide zone offensive system. You're going to run the stretch. You're going to run 18-19. You're going to run 18-90 Wanda, 18-19 support, you name it. And they're going to get the ball outside, and then they're going to do the boot action off of that and get those balls in the middle of the field. And then defensively, I'm with Z 100%. Like I would really like to be aggressive. I think you look at Hunter Renfrow is one of the leading target players, and he was out of the game last year. And no shade on that, because that was Darren Waller too, right? But Hunter always made his hay as a technician, as a route salesman, where as he's getting older, I mean, we're averaging 5.8 yards per reception at this point, right? Like they are completing, I think, under 40% of their passes beyond 9 yards down the field this season. So if you want to play high press, high pressure, and dare them to hit those throws down the field that they just have not made with any consistency this year, I think you can create a lot of havoc.
Yeah, I love going last after you two go, because I can just go, yeah, what you guys said. But I think you're right, Kyle, about the edges. That's huge in this game with Achane. I think he has a big game out of the backfield again as well, maybe even a couple of touchdowns. I love Achane and Waller all over the field in this one. And then you set up deep for Waddle. I think you try to stomp on the throat early. I think you might see a big return out of Washington, but I really think the passing game with Tua is hitting its stride. I think he's not turning the ball over. I think he's getting protected better, and I really believe that this will just continue to evolve. But I love the edges on offense, like you said, Kyle, and then on defense, just throw everything in the world at their offense because they can't handle it. And you have those linebackers on a swivel all game long for their defense, and then their offense can't handle the heat. I see the Dolphins winning by 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game. I don't see it being close. I think they're going to smoke them, and I think we're going to have a fun show on Sunday postgame.
I hope
looking
so.
forward to that with you guys. And I know he's looking forward to Bourbon Street. Kyle, what do you have coming up next on Locked On Dolphins podcast?
Yes. So another kind of walkthrough, just kind of getting caught up with the assistant coaches who talked today. That'll be the show tomorrow, and talk about the roadmap for a victory. And I'll do a final score prediction there as well. And that's it until we get on the horn right after the game. And hopefully we're celebrating another win, and looking forward to chopping up whatever happens on the field on Sunday with you guys as soon as the game ends, when we hop on the YouTube channel, and then we bring it to everybody's podcast feeds and get another hour's worth of Dolphins talk in everybody's ears.
Right around 4 Eastern on Sunday afternoon. Hopefully another W for the Dolphins, going in the right direction. Thank you so much for being here. You guys are the best part of this network, this channel, this show. We love you and we appreciate you so much. Nothing but gratitude. Also want to remind you that we'll be here live again right after the game on Sunday, and then on Wednesdays from now on, for the most part. Here and there you might have to bear with us like this week, but we appreciate you hanging with us. Thanks to all of you in the chat as well. I mean, a nice one. Cap for Life in there, Mudbone in there, having a good time. We're enjoying you guys as well. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And as always, keep your game tight and your mind right. Thank you for watching and listening to your Dolphin Squad show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Fins up.